What if the country that you're living in isn't actually a country at all? Not in the way that you've been told. Because buried deep inside of US law, dry, technical, almost invisible, there's a definition that has triggered one of the most controversial legal theories out there. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Title 28, Section 3002, a clause that most people will never read, but inside it, the United States is defined as a federal corporation, not a nation, not a republic, a corporation. So the question is, why? And more importantly, what does that mean? This is where things start to split into two completely different interpretations. On one side, you have the standard explanation, legal shorthand, administrative language, a convenient way for the system to operate internally, especially when it comes to federal debt collection. Nothing more. But on the other side, a very different picture starts to form. One that suggests that this isn't just wording, it's a reclassification. A quiet shift from sovereign nation to commercial entity. And if that's true, then everything changes, because corporations don't operate under the same rules as nations. They operate under contracts, jurisdiction, profit structures, and suddenly the idea of citizenship starts to look more like participation in a system that you didn't explicitly agree to. Now hold that thought, because this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. Title 28, Section 3220 doesn't exist in isolation. It appears specifically within the framework of federal debt collection procedures, which raises a really uncomfortable question. Why would the United States need to identify itself or define itself rather, as a corporation in the context of collecting debt? Is that just legal efficiency, or is it revealing the actual operating structure behind the scenes? Because if the system is functioning in a commercial capacity, then everything inside it, fines, your taxes, penalties, can start to resemble transactions. Not governance, but business. And that's turning point number one. Because now you're not just looking at a strange legal definition, you're looking at the possible shift in jurisdiction from constitutional principles into something that feels much more like administrative or even maritime frameworks. And that word, jurisdiction, is everything. Because jurisdiction determines which rule applies to you, and whether those rules come from a constitution or from a corporate system enforcing compliance. And here's where the narrative takes another turn. Because once people start questioning that definition, they don't stop there. They go backwards, way back, to the foundations, to the aftermath of Revolutionary War. Because the official story is simple. America broke free from the British control. End of story. But the alternative lens says, not so fast. It points to the debt that remained after the war. The financial entanglements didn't just disappear. The treaties, the agreements, the economic dependencies that continued quietly in the background. And then it connects to something even bigger. The idea that global financial systems, institutions like the IMF, act as intermediaries in a network that traces all the way back to older centres of power, including the City of London. Not London City, the one that you walk through. The City of London as a financial entity. A separate jurisdiction. A place that historically has operated as a hub for global finance. And here's the claim. That the United States, rather than being fully independent, functions with a broader financial framework. One that still ties back into the old structures. That isn't ownership in the traditional sense, but influence. Control the debt through contracts, through systems that most people never see. Now, is that provable? Or is it a pattern that people are connecting after the fact? That's where things start to get blurred. Because the evidence isn't always direct. It's interpretive. Fragments of law. Historical threads. Definitions, like the one in Title 28, that don't sit comfortably when you look at them closely. And that's turning point number 2. Because now you're not just questioning a legal phrase, you're questioning the structure itself, how it operates, who benefits, and whether the rules you think protect you are even the ones being applied. But there's one more layer to this, and this is where it gets personal. Because if the United States is functioning, operating, even partially in a corporate capacity, then what does that make you? A citizen? Or something else entirely? Because in a corporate system, individuals can be treated as entities within that system. Accounts, participants, even assets, depending on how the structure is interpreted. And suddenly, everyday interactions, licenses, registrations, agreements, start to look different. Less like rights being exercised, and more like terms being accepted. Quietly, automatically, without question. Now pause for a second, because this is where most people either lean in or completely reject the idea. And that's intentional, because the line between legal reality and interpretation are incredibly thin here. The official explanation says that this is all administrative language, nothing more. But the alternative view says that's exactly how it stays hidden. In plain sight. Wrapped in complexity. Dismissed as technical. Ignored because it doesn't sound dramatic enough. Until somebody connects the dots. And that's turning point number 3. Because now the question isn't just, is America a corporation? It's much deeper than that. It's about perception, framework and control. Are you operating within a system designed for governance or one designed for management? Because those two things are not the same. And if the definitions at the core of that system have changed, even slightly shifted, then the implications don't stay on the paper. They ripple outward into law, into enforcement, into everyday life. So here's the real question. Not whether the United States is literally a British corporation, but whether elements of its legal and financial structure reflect something more. Commercial, more than people realise. And if they do, was that accidental or by design? Because once you start asking that, you don't look at Title 28 the same way again. You start looking at everything completely differently. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.